book nerds, welcome to my channel. So today I'm actually going to do a tag that I've created myself. So I'm calling this the How You Read book tag, and essentially it's a tag about your reading habits. I wrote this tag and then I googled what I was originally going to call it, which is the reading habits tag, and found that that already exists. But the questions on it aren't actually too similar to the questions that I came up with, so I decided to do this anyway. And yeah, it's just like a fun little tag. It's quite short, and it's meant to kind of make you think about how you read books and whether you might want to change things up a bit. You can, if you want, you can challenge yourself to maybe try the opposite of one of these questions once you've worked out how you read. So yeah, I'm just going to launch straight into it. So the first question is, do you read books straight after you finished one, as in with no break, or do you prefer to digest a book before you move on to the next one? I find that personally I have to read or start a book, if not immediately after, then maybe like 10 or 20 minutes after. Otherwise I get into like a reading slump in terms of I can't pick which book I want to read next. So I need to kind of at least pick a book quickly. I usually read on my e-reader, so I've got about 1,000 books on my e-reader, and if I don't instantly pick which one I'm going to read next, I end up just scrolling through all of them for ages trying to decide on which one to read. But I do like to think about a book before I start reading the next one, and I like time to reflect on it, unless it was awful. If it was awful, then I'm fine and I can just move straight on. Next question is, if you're reading a book series and you've read the first one, do you start the second book immediately after finishing the first one, or do you like to give yourself a little break and read something else in between? So usually what I do on the whole is I will read a book in between. So I will finish the first book of a series, read one other book, and then read the second book of the series. That way it's still fresh on my mind, but I don't have to instantly launch straight back into the world. I find that if I do that, while I enjoy it, if I'm really into a series and I like just launching straight into the next one, I usually get a bit, not bored, but the first few chapters are a bit slow for me because they tend to be written as if you haven't read the book immediately before it, and so they do a bit of recapping, and I prefer to have that after a little break. Next question is, do you read books of the same genre, like in one clump, or do you prefer to mix up which genres you read? So, for example, if you like reading thrillers and fantasy like I do you alternate between them? Do you get into a period where you just read a bunch of thrillers? And this is a harder one for me to answer because usually I think I do the clumping thing. So I think once I'm in the mood for thrillers, I will read maybe 3 or 4 thrillers before moving on to something else. But sometimes, similar to the whole time to digest a book, I don't want to read a book with 2 similar topics directly after each other, because then I feel like I'm tainting the first book somehow by like replacing it with the second one, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I think I do the clumping thing in general. Sometimes I'll just get a random craving and pick up a random book. Next question is, if you enjoy reading anthologies, so collections of short stories, do you read them in order, or do you pick which stories you're going to read and just read them however you want to read them? I am a stickler for reading them in order. I can't just jump around, even on an ebook reader, which does make it super easy because you can just select which story and it will take you immediately there. I can't do that. I have to read them in order. In fact, the idea of not reading them in order never even occurred to me until I started watching other booktubers, and I was like, oh, people don't do that. I guess you could call that the inspiration for this tag. But yeah, I have to read them in order. Similarly, the next question is, do you read one book at a time, or do you like reading multiple books at the same time? Again, I didn't even realise that people did this. I have to read one book at a time. I read quite quickly, so I can understand perhaps if you're a slower reader and you want to read more stories at the same time. I can understand that, but because I am quite a quick reader, once I'm in a book, I'm in that world, and I do not like being taken out of that world. So I have to read one book at a time. But yeah, I think people who do read multiple stories, I'd be interested to hear why you read multiple stories at the same time, because for me it doesn't really have any appeal, but obviously for a lot of people it does. And the final question is, do you prefer reading ebooks or physical books? I guess you can throw in audiobooks as well if you prefer those, but yeah, I was already mentioned I prefer reading ebooks now. I used to only read physical books, but I went to university and like I said, I read really quickly, and you can't physically take about 100 physical books with you when you're moving around a lot, so my Kindle became my godsend, and now I'm just so used to the format. I also have this weird thing now where I don't like taking physical books around with me. I feel like if a book is in my bag, it's going to get crumpled or it's going to get stuff on it, even though my bag's perfectly clean. So that's another reason, because I read a lot on commutes and it's just easier to just bring out my Kindle, read on that, fold it away, and then it's done. But yeah, so that is all of the questions on this tag. I will put them all down below. If you are watching this video, consider yourself tagged. I would really love for more people to do this. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. It helps me out massively. And I will see you next time.